I'd like to welcome you to Veterans Issues here at CANTV 21. We are representing the United States Veterans Art Program. My name is Carol Williams, and we have Lt Colonel Lucila Ibarra. Do we have to say that you're retired? Are you retired yet?
Not officially.
Because I'd rather say she's a lieutenant colonel. That's,
Not officially.
That's very cool.
Officially, it will be in July.
Oh, okay. So we got a lieutenant colonel here,
Yeah.
and that makes me very happy. I'm a veteran as well, but she outranks me. We're going to talk about something that is very pertinent as well as most important, which is sexual assault in the military. It has its own acronym called Military Sexual Trauma, which includes not just physical injury or physical assault, but also psychological harm, which is very long-lasting, just like PTSD. So it has its own acronym, MST. We've been talking about this for several months, and we decided to keep talking about it because it needs to be talked about. Lt Colonel Ibarra was the sexual assault prevention officer for several different assignments. You can tell about that a little bit.
Yeah, I was actually in Iraq. I was the sexual assault response coordinator, and that was, well, I'll tell you more a little bit about that later. But in my other capacity, I was the ADCO, Alcohol and Drug Control Officer, and we see that there's a lot of correlation. There's a lot of overlapping that happens, but including with that, it's leadership. Leadership is very pivotal into what's going on with this area, with this crisis, with this problem.
It is a crisis.
It is. It is a crisis, and has been for years. I came in 1980, and you came in earlier than that, and we see that we're still doing the lip service that we're taught to. Well, we're doing all this good stuff and we're doing all this, but yet we haven't changed the culture.
I have to say, it grieves me to say this, but I think it's actually gotten worse, and the statistics show that. I don't think the VA started screening people until within the last 10 years, probably. Everyone who comes out of the military, when they go to the VA to register as a veteran for health care, they are screened with the question, and they ask male and female, have you experienced sexual harassment, sexual assault? Have you been a victim of either one? So the VA is collecting statistics. The Department of Defense is collecting statistics. There are several watchdog groups that are collecting statistics as well. And you talked about a study that just came out this week that shows that the percentage has gone up. What's the increment of increase? 20 or 30%?
Well, the report is actually in 2 volumes, which that has not been done before. So it's volume 1, volume 2. I couldn't even download volume 1.
Oh.
It's that big. And so the other problem that I have with all this is that we have changes. We no longer can smoke in buildings.
Right.
So we need to understand that, oh, this is no longer acceptable. This is we need to now wear seatbelts. A lot of things that we have to do for our safety, for our well-being, for our livelihood. But the problem I have with people like, I guess people like me, I'm a survivor. When it was very much accepted and condoned back in the 70s, 80s, even before that, and still now, we change our standards. So not only the VA has changed the standards, because the VA had no understanding, or really very little data, very little research, because people like me have a very hard time trusting the system, trusting leadership, and I'm a leader. So it has not stopped. It has not stopped. And I still say that many of our leaders, because I'm one of them, I'm a leader. Many of our leaders that is like, oh gosh, but it's like with parents. When parents say, gosh, I used to smoke pot when I was a teenager. How can I tell that to my teenager to not smoke pot? And so wait a minute. It's wrong. And today we're more educated, we're more informed, we're more aware of the ramifications of this. And these are long-term consequences that affect readiness.
Long-term consequences going 20, 25, 30 years, the lifespan of whoever experiences these things. And I do have to tell the audience that when you say you're a survivor of MST. You are. And as a lieutenant colonel who is in a leadership position, you are unique in the example of someone who not only has experienced what it is that you're supposed to be preventing, but you're also a person who is trying to compromise your confidentiality with the job that you were given to do, which is to essentially appear to be setting down policy that will help to change the situation. So I just wanted to make sure that the audience knows who it is that they're seeing on their TV screen. This is someone who is an important person to listen to. We are a call-in hotline show, and you'll see your number on the screen right there, and we do actually have someone who has called us. We have Dana on the line who has answered the phone. And caller, would you like to tell us your name?
God. No, shh. Hello?
Hi. My name's Carol.
Name is
this
Elena.
is Lucy.
Sorry about that. My daughter just got home.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
We're talking about military sexual trauma here. Are you a veteran?
Yes, I am a veteran.
Would you like
Yes.
to share something or ask something, or would
Yes,
you like to set us
I
straight?
just wanted to state that I see that
you may
there's
need
a
to
mindset that has been established in the armed services.
You may need to turn off your TV volume because it's reflecting in your
I
phone.
see.
But we're hearing you. We're hearing you, and we understand what you're saying. That it's the mode of operandi, if you want to say, it in the military community, just as it is in the civilian community. It's just that we're talking about the military because that's our MO.
Right, and what I wanted to say was, I'm getting in contact with old soldiers that I used to know.
Your Army
and
buddies?
Army buddies, and I thought things had changed, and they haven't changed, and they still look at women as we really have no function for them, When I was in the military, I got out because every single time it was time for promotion, they would take my name off the list and so they could send a male soldier, and then my name would reappear on the list for going to NCO Academy or to the schools. And I was doing double the work that everybody else was doing, and I was always... You're not really, we never were really seen as people. We were just, especially being Latina in the U.S. Army, we were even the lower of the lowest.
Right.
And women, you did something like I was cleaning out my vehicle, and they'd be like, oh, look at you bending over. But you couldn't say that to them. They were always indirect ideologies. You never won anything because you deserved it. You got rank, or you got, like, if there was a female sergeant who was airborne, they would say, oh, she must have slept with somebody to get airborne.
Right.
When I would come home, they would always say, take your wife flowers. If I asked time off to go get my kids, they would say no. But if a guy asked time off to go take his wife to the hospital, he would get the time off.
Right.
But they would always tell me, well, don't you get your family plan in order?
Right.
It was always, in a way, trying to say that we were never on key with what we were doing.
Right. It's a format of discriminatory attitude to, first of all, identify you as being female, that you have a separate agenda that isn't as respected as someone else. You know what? I'm going to show you. Can you still see your TV screen?
Yes, I'm watching the screen.
Okay. I'm going to show you something that Lucy brought in, which is from a pamphlet called the Preventative Maintenance Monthly. Here we go. This is the night from 1970 something, that when Lucy has gotten these. Here's two women walking by. This is Joe's dope sheet. This is the little cartoon in the pamphlet here that tells you how to maintain your truck. The guy, the woman standing by the truck says, "The life of your tires, friend Joe, depends on inflation. You know, if you ignore that, they'll be too round or flat, and sometimes, too, cost you your dough." So they've got two women walking over here. One is obviously overinflated.
Right.
And the other one is underinflated. And then the caption on the bottom says, "We have the world's best equipment."
Take care of it, yeah.
It's these things, and it's things like this. And we have entire books of this that we can give as examples. But
well, like I said, I used to work on my vehicle. Mm-hmm. And I would, you know how you get on the front of your vehicle to check the oil? Everybody does it,
right.
Male and female.
Right.
But they would always say a sly remark to me, "Oh, bend over like that, that's how Indians die." Right. I never understood that saying, but, you know, it was always like that. If I fell ill during something, that it was because I was a female, and not because I could possibly actually be ill.
Right.
And if I wanted to take care of my children, then of course I wasn't together. But if a guy wanted to do the very same thing, he was being responsible.
Well,
and I was a sergeant in the Army. I got out. There was a part of the Army that I loved a lot.
Right.
But I had a set of twins that I never saw. I have 5 babysitters in 2 years, and they had my children. I visited them.
Right.
And it was very difficult. You know, it's like the armed forces, they want you there, but they take advantage of everything we have to offer.
Now, what is your name again, you said?
Elena Rodriguez.
Elena. Well, we didn't need the whole name just in case you didn't want it to be on air.
You know what? But I'm always clearing forward.
Elena, we're really glad you called in. Thanks for your service, as they say. And what you're doing is you're telling our viewers, and we're going to actually show the overhead. We're showing our viewers by Elena talking to us that these are things that we're not inventing these situations. Now, you can say that there's the entire parameter of harassment. Those examples that she gave us, harassment. Obviously, there's a much more extreme parameter, which is equally disturbing, and it's all connected.
And yet we are taught and we are a certain behavior that is acceptable, and also we are reprimanded for behavior that's not acceptable. So where did this behavior begin? It began with other leaders setting, because we learn by those who are over us, and we learn, oh, so that must be right. Oh, okay. So that must be okay. Well, that's not really harassment. I was just flirting.
Right. Well, one of the things that was in the news today, there were 3 important things in the news this week. One of which was, of course, the Air Force Lieutenant Colonel that was the branch officer for the sexual assault prevention, who was caught actually molesting some woman at a bar. It had his mugshot in the paper. It looked like he got a little roughed up. The other one is this report that showed that there's an increase in sexual assault in the military. And one of the people who commented on this report was quoted in the paper as saying that we have to look at this with this reference point that some 20% of these people who say that they were sexually assaulted in the military have a history of sexual assault as civilians. And he was very pointed when he said that 20% of these women who were victims of sexual assault have previously been sexual assault victims, which in itself, on its face, is a discriminatory comment when you're going to talk about if 20% of any given population is a victim, then there has to be a corresponding percentage of offenders, but you're not going to talk about the offenders. You're still talking about the victims. You're still victimizing the victims. You're still putting women on trial for rape and making them look as if they were the offenders.
And they're the problem.
And that they're the problem.
And so we're not going to admit anyone who's got a pre-existing condition or may develop into a psychological mental problem in the future. Now, what I've said this before is that, well, in the 1980s, when I came in, it was viewed as a pride and a privilege, but it wasn't viewed. The military was not viewed as that, because I had many in my platoon. I came in as an E1, enlisted E1. So there were many of my fellow platoon peers, soldiers, female soldiers, that were given court-ordered decisions. Either you're going to go to jail or you're going to join the military.
Oh,
so
sure.
it was seen as a disciplinary measure, as something, this is going to fix you, this is going to get you, this is going to put you in the right path. You need some discipline, some hard, some tough guidance.
Structure.
Right.
And then the structure turns out to be a
this
very
is how we're going to
destructive.
punish you. This is how we're going to punish you. So you're going to learn, or you're going to end up in jail. If you don't do well, you're going to end up in jail. And there was several in my platoon who were in that category. But then in the 1990s, we had what was called right sizing. So there were hiring freezes and a right sizing. So we had a platoon, we had a unit, we had an organization, but it was cut to the point where the quality is no longer there. And it hasn't been, because we accepted people who had committed crimes. Now, history repeats itself. So now in 2004 to 2010, we have the Iraq War. We have Afghanistan. We have deployments, massive deployments. After 9/11, oh yeah. So then we again, standards are laxed. And so we accept people who had committed crimes. Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Has this ever? Yeah. So we allow that. We allow that. So not only do I address this issue, but also it correlates with suicide and substance abuse. Now, one of the problems I have is that being an ADCO, alcohol and drug control officer, yes, we do a lot of random drug testing, but who are the ones that don't want to be randomly drug tested or have a random alcohol check? Our leaders.
Oh, yes.
So
absolutely.
I had all these things, but I can only advise.
Right.
I can only advise. So we had these breath scans, and they expired. So because they were not being used, and we need to use them. Accidents, wellness,
right.
But we don't use them.
Well, one of the things that
Don't
they're
wanna use
talking
them.
about changing is, if you can't change the atmosphere and the environment, you can change how you prosecute and discipline behavior. And contrary to people that say that you can't legislate behavior and that you can't legislate ethics, we can legislate all those things. And in the military, they have what is now being perceived as not a very effective means of pursuing prosecution of these types of offenses. You can win a trial, essentially, a court-martial, against your offender, and it's up to the commanding general whether or not he's going to uphold that verdict or whether or not he's going to mete out punishment, or whether or not he's going to reduce that person out of the service. And these are the things that people are saying, well, if we can't change individual behavior and we can't go and micromanage everything that every single person does, what can we change about the system? And this is what they're having a big meeting with Obama and at the White House this week, which is to talk about, obviously, the things that we're doing aren't working.
Well,
they're not working.
And Secretary Hagel did mention that no more stand downs, no more of this mandatory training, no more of this, because it's not working. And it isn't working because what the military does, many do, we are so short in time and we have so much to do in such a little amount of time that something that used to take 40 hours. All right, make it happen in 40 minutes.
Right.
So we're cutting corners, cutting corners to the point where the quality is not there. And then when there is an inspection or there is a some kind of incident, well, where's the document? Who signed? Where?
Right.
Then what many do is that let's take the signature sheet around, and so everybody signs. Oh no, you don't have to be in the training, or
Right.
you just
So you're talking about the difference between effective training and figuring out how to change the mode of consequences that people will have to suffer when they are identified as being an offender.
So all kind of doctrine, all kind of policies, all kinds of regulations can come out from the JAG, from the IG, from the Pentagon, and from the DoD level. But how it's executed,
Right.
it will not be
Right.
dictated. Yes,
Right.
it's advised, and yes,
Right.
it's we advise this, but then how it's launched, it's so different.
Well, there is a movement out there where people are realizing that in the military that there are options, subjective options by the commanding generals with prosecuting the cases, punishing these cases, and that if there's one thing that you can do as a person who's just sitting in your house, you can contact your representative and say, I support this change in how the DoD, how the Army, all the joint services, how they treat these types of crimes, to where now we treat these crimes like a crime in any other situation. It's no different than having someone steal something from you. It's no different than having someone rape you as a civilian. Why do you think as a civilian that you could have a sexual assault be done to you and the mayor of the city can decide whether or not to punish the person who's found guilty? That would be unheard of. But that's exactly what's happening in the military.
And the particular case, this very specific case that you're referring to, Carol, I'm very familiar with General Franklin. He was the commander in Balad when I was there. And what happened was that, from my understanding, is that, yes, the case went to board of a lieutenant colonel who was accused, and there was guidance, and there was advice, there was recommendations, and supposedly General Franklin decided, no, we're going to keep, this
Right.
is okay.
It's
go
up to
for
the
promotion.
whim of the commander, given his view of the circumstances, which is not the way the world should work.
Well, and I believe that many of these subject matter experts, like our IGs, our EOs, our surgeons, our JAGs, need to be in a separate entity, not being rated by that commander.
Right.
Because I believe it's a conflict of interest.
It is a conflict of
completely
interest.
conflict of interest.
And it's actually a conflict of our interest to have ourselves treated unfairly. This is not a gender issue. This is not a women's issue. It's happening to everyone, everywhere. It's a societal issue. And we need to get a grip on it, both in the civilian world and in the military world. But we're talking about the military world because that's who we are. And that's what we're talking about today. On a lighter side, I'm going to show you a picture of
Tony.
Lieutenant Colonel Ibarra's comfort dog. Now, we're talking about what do you do? You've got MST, you've got PTSD. You've gone to the VA, and the VA puts you on a big long list. Then you finally get into the VA, and you really don't care for the person who's providing counseling. There are a lot of different things that you can do independently. Now, Lucy has her comfort dog, but not everyone can have Tony.
It takes time.
It
takes
does
time,
take
and
time.
it's also seeking out.
Yes, absolutely.
Get help.
Absolutely.
Talk to someone.
There are some free counseling sources on the internet. If you have any questions and you want to get in touch with us, Here's our website, United States Veterans Art Program, www.usvap.org. Write us an email, and we will be back next month. Thank you very much. This is Carol Williams and Lt Colonel Lucila Ibarra.
And to all, happy Mother's Day this weekend.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll see you
Mom.
next month.